What's up, everyone? My name is Raz. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new here, welcome back. This is going to be my guide on No Mover Havoc Demon Hunter for Season 2 of Midnight. We're going to be going over everything from stats to talent builds, rotation, everything you need to know about doing No Mover Havoc Demon Hunter in Season 2 of Midnight. And there are chapters marked below, so if you are looking for something specific, be sure to check the chapters and skip ahead to the part that you are looking for advice on. Now, the reason why I am making this guide is not only have I been making these guides for a couple years now, and I have been playing Demon Hunter since I first started playing the game in late BFA, and when movement talents kind of made a comeback in Dragonflight, and I decided that movement talents were not for me when I attempted to play them in Dragonflight. And I think it's perfectly okay and valid if you do not enjoy the movement talent builds. That being said, if that is something you enjoy, if you like doing Mover Havoc Demon Hunter, I love that journey for you, and no hate to you, honestly. But this guide is definitely not for you. I am going to be keeping this guide very high level and beginner friendly. We're not gonna get really hardcore into the nitty gritty of everything, as I do want to keep this just very high level and simple to understand. Let's get started. So the first thing I really want to talk about is what has changed for Havoc Demon Hunter and how it affects No Mover builds specifically, because there are some things that have affected us as No Movers. Specifically our Fury. Fury has been changed. So our Immo Aura and Blind Fury have been nerfed on our Fury gain, however our auto attacks have been buffed. So what that means is No Mover is gonna feel quite a bit more starved of Fury than it really ever has in the past, especially comparing last season to this season. I did notice playing on PTR and in my M0s that I am now having moments where I do run out of buttons, but it is pretty short-lived. It's only for a second or two, and maybe I slam a Fell Blade in order to gain some Fury or throw a Glaive or something like that. And it was very noticeable at first, but the more I got into the flow of everything and the more I played No Mover in my M0s, the more I got used to it. So it really wasn't that drastic of a change, but it is going to be noticeable if you've been playing No Mover this whole time and you start to play it in Season 2. And if you're kind of wondering why you're running out of buttons, it's because of this specific change. The good news for us No Movers, though, is that inertia was nerfed pretty significantly. So the best in slot talent builds all run Exergy, which is kind of like a mover light version. All of our talent builds are all gonna be No Mover. We're not pressing any movement abilities to do damage. Which brings us to the next point, is how far behind is No Mover from everything else, from the Exergy talent builds? Well, I have some sims here for you all, and this is going to be our raid sim here. So at the top we have, this is our regular mover build, and then right here is going to be our Aldrachi Reaver single target no mover, so that's only about 5% behind. This right here is going to be the Fell Scarred Exergy build. That's about 8.4% behind. We're not going to be running that one anyway. The one that's a little bit more significantly behind is going to be our No Mover Fell Scarred Raid build, about 11% behind. So that does seem a little bit significant, but if you're running Heroic Raid, if you're like, I'd say normal or Heroic Raid, you're probably fine to do No Mover Fell Scarred for your raid. But we will be going over both Aldrachi Reaver and No Mover Fell Scarred for our raid talent builds in the talent build and rotation section. Better news if you're a Mythic Pluser is No Mover is even less behind. So at the top here we have our Fell Scarred Exergy M+, and then here is our Low Mover, which we're gonna do No Mover. It's the same talent build, but I'll discuss the details of what low versus No Mover means in the talent build and rotation section. But again, it's only about 6% behind. So you can get pretty competitive in your keys as a No Mover Havoc Demon Hunter, with it only being that small of a percentage behind. All right, now that we've kind of gone over some numbers and some changes to Havoc No Mover, let's talk about gearing and stats and trinkets. So we do have our BiS list here on WoWHead, but one thing I do want to make a note of is that these BiS lists really only work if you have every single piece of gear here on this BiS list, but there are a couple pieces I want to make a note of that you are for sure going to want to get your hands on no matter what, and that is going to be a Mon Muso Warlord's Vengeance, which is a weapon from the raid, and then also Zul'jin's Guillotine Technique, which is a trinket. And these two items are going to work in sync together and give you a pretty hefty damage buff. So definitely try to spend your bonus rolls on these two items and get these items right away no matter what. On top of that, for sure, getting your tier set in, because you want to try to get your 4 set as soon as possible so that once you get your 4 set, you start to get extra catalyst drops from dungeons and from raids so that you can catalyze whatever you want after that. And kind of already went over this, but we do have our trinket list here. Again, this one is going to be your #1 trinket that you're going to want to go for, especially in sync with the weapon from raid. But then just make sure when you're reading through this trinket tier list is that you're reading what each of these does. Some of them work better in single target scenarios. Some of them are better in AoE. And then another thing to note of is in these first couple weeks, as you are working on gearing up your Demon Hunter, if an item is a 10 eye level upgrade or more, I would take it unless it's a really, really bad trinket. If we're talking like F tier trinket or a trinket that's not even really listed on here, just don't equip the trinket. But in general, when you're gearing, if you get something that's 10 eye levels or more, you definitely want to equip that. I will also link a trinket tier list video in the description if you want a more in-depth guide on your trinkets, but TLDR, Guillotine Technique is what you want. And speaking of gearing, you just want to make sure that you are stacking crit mastery as much as possible. Try not to really have much else. Try not to stress too much about these, just as long as you are having as much crit strike and mastery as possible. But again, not too much. You don't want to have diminishing returns, which is outlined the exact ratings and how it works right here in the WoWHead guide. So no matter what, if you're running Felskard or Aldrachi Reaver, it's always going to be crit mastery every single time. All right, now we're going to be getting into talent builds and rotation. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about talents and what has changed and how to find the no mover builds before we get into the nitty-gritty of specific builds and rotations. And again, there are chapters marked, so if you just want to get into the talents and rotation, you can skip to those parts. But there are some important things in this section about talents that I do want to make a note of, so I definitely, if you can hang, I would definitely watch this part if you can. Now, on the Havoc WoWHead guide, there are not too many no mover builds here. There is one low mover build here, and again, I'm going to be discussing what low mover versus no mover means in more detail in our talent section, but there are a lot of no mover builds. You just kind of have to dig for them, and I'm going to show you how. So we're going to go to the top here. We're going to go to Tools, Talent Calculator, and Havoc Demon Hunter. And then here, we're going to scroll down to Load Export Builds, and we're going to click here, and we see low and no mover builds here for both Raid and Mythic Plus. Now, again, I'm going to talk about what low mover means versus no mover more in detail in each talent section, but you can find all of the low and no mover builds here. And then I will also have talent builds linked in the description as well if you just want easy access to each talent build. Okay, so first we are going to go over the Felskard Mythic Plus build, and all of these talents will be linked in the description below. So one thing I want to make a note of, and I mentioned this several times earlier, is these low versus no mover builds. So we have this talent here. It's called Initiative. Damaging an enemy before they damage you increases your crit strike chance by 10% for 5 seconds, blah, blah, blah. Vengeful Retreat refreshes your potential to trigger this effect. Because in a Mythic Plus situation, we are constantly changing targets, we don't really have to worry about trying to refresh this buff with Vengeful Retreat. So you really do not need to be pressing Vengeful Retreat unless you really want to, if you're feeling spicy. Again, completely not necessary. So that's why this is technically a low mover build. You're gonna still pick this talent. So yeah, that's why it is called low mover. So anytime you see something with a low mover build and it's going to be in a Mythic Plus situation, that is the reason for that. All right, so I am going to go through this rotation nice and slow. That makes it easier on me, but then that also makes it easier on you all watching so that you can kind of see what is going on. First, throw your Glaive. We're gonna get all of our immolation auras out. Use your potion and trinket if you have. I-beam, annihilation, hunt, essence break into our double death sweep, and then we're gonna meta. We're gonna death sweep again, consuming fire, annihilation, and abyssal gaze, and then get another demon surge out here, and double death sweep here, and continue on. All right, now that we've gone over the opener, I'm gonna explain the entire rotation in detail and basically what your priority is and why we are pressing the buttons that we are pressing. So if you're interested in learning how to play Fellscarred, keep watching. So the main thing with Fellscarred is it has everything to do with what is called a demon surge. And what a demon surge is while your demon form is active, it says right here, the first cast of each empowered ability includes a demon surge causing you to explode with fell energy. So those are those big green explosions that you see here. And when it says empowered ability, that in general is going to be our annihilation, death sweep, and consuming fire. After you I-beam, you do enter demon form and you are going to get an empowered annihilation and death sweep. So make sure that after every single I-beam that you are pressing an annihilation and death sweep. And due to our Apex talent, Eternal Hunt, you are going to get 2 death sweeps after every I-beam. So really, after every I-beam, it's going to be a double death sweep, so just keep pressing that button, and then right after that, hit an annihilation. And now with the addition of Essence Break, try as much as you can to get in that double death sweep right after pressing Essence Break. One last little thing to note about our meta window is after you hit that meta, you're gonna hit each of your demon surges once, like we just went over, and you're going to press Abyssal Gaze last. And the reason why you're going to press Abyssal Gaze last is because not only does Abyssal Gaze give you another demon surge, it gives you 2 additional demon surges, one on annihilation and then another on your death sweep. And again, make sure to hit that double death sweep because you will get another double death sweep after hitting Abyssal Gaze. And another tip that has to do with our Apex talents is the Hunt now empowers both your I-beam and Abyssal Gaze to do more damage. I'm not a huge fan of this talent because it creates some very awkward lineups, especially because it only empowers it for a certain amount of time instead of a flat damage buff. So you're gonna notice here, I know I've played this clip over and over, but it's a really good example of how the rotation is going to work, is you're gonna see me here pressing the Hunt right before my Abyssal Gaze. You want to try and do that as much as possible because your Abyssal Gaze is a huge damage buff, and then you are also buffing it with the Hunt in addition to that. If you are not in meta and meta's not gonna be up for a while, press the Hunt before your I-beam to try and get that damage buff on your I-beam instead. But that is the reason for our opener pressing I-beam and then the Hunt. It's because we are using the Hunt after I-beam to buff our Abyssal Gaze in our meta window instead of just our regular I-beam. But again, as you go along and as you start to play and get in the flow of things. This isn't always going to line up perfectly, which is why I think this is a cringe talent. You're probably going to make mistakes on this. It happens, but as much as you can, just really try to make that hunt buff your Abyssal Gaze and your I-Beam as much as possible. Alright, so this is the part of the guide where normally I would go over an Aldrachi Reaver No Mover build for M+, but as it stands, I'm really not going to recommend that you play that because right now Aldrachi Reaver does almost no AoE damage. Yes, it does funnel and prio, but if for Mythic Plus, you're really going to be wanting to run Fellscarred. But essentially, if you did, for whatever reason, want to run Aldrachi Reaver, basically the rotation is just throw your Reaver's Glaive, and then Chaos Strike and Blade Dance, or Annihilation and then Death Sweep. That's just going to be your Reaver's Glaive combo every single time for Mythic Plus. Alright, that being said, let's get into raid builds. Now, the Aldrachi Reaver is the one that I am going to recommend the most, because it does do pretty decent single target, and then it also does quite a bit of cleave as well with your Reaver's Glaive combo. So here is the talent build, which will also be linked in the description below, and let's get into the opener. Alright, so for our Aldrachi Reaver opener for raid, we are going to cast our Immo Aura pre-pull to generate some fury. Then we're gonna hunt in, use your potion or trinket, Reaver's Glaive, I-Beam, Essence Break, Death Sweep, Annihilation, Death Sweep, Meta, I-Beam, then our double Death Sweep again, and then continue on. So pretty simple. And you'll notice that Fellblade actually sucks up all those souls that we need for our Reaver's Glaives, and then you can see I have another one here. And while we're here, I'm going to really quick go over Reaver's Glaive combos. So there's very little single target, like pure single target here. Most of these raid fights are going to be cleave situations instead of just pure single target. Your Reaver's Glaive combo is going to be the opposite. So after we throw our Reaver's Glaive, we are going to Chaos Strike first and then Blade Dance, and that's going to increase our extra slashes to 12. And then again, for pure single target, Reaver's Glaive, Blade Dance, and then Chaos Strike, or Death Sweep and Annihilation, whichever one is up. That's essentially how Aldrachi Reaver works. We're not really worrying about demon surges. It's just throwing that glaive and then getting your Reaver's Glaive combo off, whether it is using your Chaos Strike and Annihilation first, and then this second for cleave situations, or your Death Sweep / Blade Dance and then Annihilation or Chaos Strike, and that's going to be for single target situations. And then everything else with your rotation applies. You are going to be wanting to use your Hunt to buff your I-Beam, and then you are going to want to Essence Break and then use your double Death Sweep when you can as much as possible. But again, don't have to worry about Demon Surges. You don't have to worry about your Immo Aura in this build at all. It really doesn't do much. It is simply there to help you gain some fury. Alright, last but not least, we have the Fellscarred Raid build. Now this one does sim quite a bit behind, if you recall from our Sims section. It just has virtually no single target. However, it does do quite a bit of AoE, so while it sims quite a bit behind, it could still work for raid just because it does do quite a bit of AoE, and there are a lot of cleave fights and fights in the raid where you are going to want a little bit of multi-target. So this is the talent build for raid, and as far as rotation, the rotation is actually identical to the Mythic Plus rotation. So if you're interested in learning the rotation for Fellscarred, definitely go back to the Mythic Plus rotation section, and then as well as the section on how to play Fellscarred in detail if you are interested in learning that. And in general, whether you're playing either talent tree, just remember that your biggest tips for playing Havoc Demon Hunter, whether you're playing Felscard or Aldrachi Reaver, is just make sure to just hit that Essence Break on cooldown, slam that double Death Sweep, use your Hunt to buff your Eye Beam or your Abyssal Gaze if you are in Felscard, and just try to always be pressing something. A bad global is better than no global, and as long as you just try your best to do your rotation, everyone's gonna screw up and nobody is gonna do a rotation perfectly every single time, but as long as you try to do it to the best of your ability every time and just keep practicing, you're already 90% of the way there. And I know that these talent builds got very slightly more complicated with Essence Break being added to the mix. I know last season that was a whole button that we just didn't even have to worry about, but I promise, keep pressing it on cooldown and try not to overthink it. I promise it's going to be okay. If I can handle playing Essence Break, you can too. All right, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you. Please be sure to like this video if you liked it, subscribe, it really helps to support my channel, and subscribing is also free. You can also feel free to leave a comment. I do read all of my comments. And all of those things also help to push this video out into the algorithm so that more people who also enjoy No Mover can see this video. You can also catch me live streaming over on Twitch at twitch.tv/razgames. You can feel free to hop in, say hi, ask any questions that you want. And then I also have a Discord server if you're interested in joining my Discord. My Discord does announce when I go live so that you never have to miss a live stream. And then I also post all of my YouTube videos in there as well as my streaming schedule, because my IRL schedule is all over the place and I cannot hope to keep a streaming schedule. Same with my YouTube videos. So if you want to keep up on when my content is going live, definitely hop in the Discord for sure. All right, again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, night, morning, wherever you are in the world. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!